My grandson shoved me into the lake laughing as I flailed in the water. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandpa," he said while I kicked and gasped, desperate for air. He was only 9, yet he treated my life like it was some kind of punchline. From the dock, I saw my son, his father standing there with his arms folded. My daughter-in-law sipped her wine, a smirk tugging at her lips. Not one of them moved. No hand reached out. They just stood there and watched as I struggled, choking, while the lake swallowed me whole. At 65, still weak from surgery, I was nothing but a burden in their eyes. That was the moment it hit me. They weren't waiting to see if I'd make it. They were waiting to see if I'd go under. But they overlooked one thing. I don't go under. I survive. And soon enough, they'll understand exactly what that means. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share where you're watching from. The cold shock of the water cut through me like shattered glass. My chest seized my shoulder, burned with the same pain my doctor had warned me about, and every instinct screamed to just let go. Yet something older than fear kept me kicking a stubborn breath in a man who had been underestimated far too many times. When I finally broke the surface, coughing and sputtering with burning eyes, I looked back toward the dock. Jason stood tall with that cocky grin people mistake for charm, but I knew better. It was cruelty dressed up nice. His friends stood beside him laughing, one even clapping like it was a performance. Then my eyes landed on Mark, my only son. He didn't move. He didn't yell. He didn't even blink. His arms were crossed like he was watching a routine, just waiting for the next act. And Linda, his wife, raised her wine glass in a mock toast, flashing that polished smile she saves for strangers. "Guess you can swim after all," Jason shouted down when I clawed at the dock's edge. "Tough old man." The laughter that followed stung worse than the water in my lungs. It echoed heavy and mean, like even the lake had turned against me. I dragged myself up, knees scraping against the wooden boards, my shirt soaked and clinging with the weight of betrayal. No one reached for me. No towel, no concern, just silence and smirks. I didn't ask why. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, dripping breath, ragged, and walked past them all. Past the grill smoking with burgers no one offered me. Past the lawn chairs where they lounged, acting like nothing had just happened. My wet footprints trailed across the deck, but not one of them followed. Inside the house, the air conditioning hit my skin like a cruel reminder of what I'd just escaped. I headed straight to the small bathroom off the kitchen, locked the door, and stared at the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the one I remembered. Gray hair plastered to my head, eyes red and raw from the lake skin sagging and pale. I looked like a ghost haunting my own home. Pressing both palms to the sink water dripping off my sleeves, I whispered, "Is this who I am to them? A ghost they can laugh at." Jason's laugh still rang in my ears, sharp and cutting like something breaking. It wasn't just a boy's laugh. It was the sound of someone taught that cruelty equals cleverness, that disrespect equals strength. And who taught him that? Not me. My mind drifted uninvited to the years when Jason was small. Barefoot in my backyard, fists clutching wildflowers like treasure. He'd hand them to me grinning ear to ear. "Grandpa, you're the best part of this house," he once told me, pressing his little head against my chest. That boy was gone now, replaced by someone who could shove me into a lake and laugh while I fought for breath. And the truth I'd avoided for years rose sharp in my throat. I hadn't just lost my grandson. I'd raised him in the absence of his distracted parents. I fed him, clothed him, sat at his bedside through asthma attacks, bought him a second-hand guitar when he dreamed of playing music. I gave him my time, my savings, my love. And somehow they taught him to throw it all back in my face. I peeled off my soaked shirt, grabbed the guest towel no one else ever touched, and dried myself slowly. Every scrape, every ache was no longer weakness, it was clarity. When I stepped into the kitchen, laughter filled the air again. Vacation plans. Cancun. Linda waved around a glossy brochure. Jason scrolled his phone, leaving wet footprints across my floor without even noticing. Mark leaned against the counter, sipping the lemonade I'd made that morning. I sat quietly at the breakfast table, still damp, still trembling. Invisible. Not one glance in my direction, not a single word. The silence pressed down heavy, so I let it stretch, daring someone to notice. No one did. So I stood still quiet and walked down the hall to my bedroom. On the edge of my bed, the same spot where I'd once read Jason bedtime stories, I sat with a towel draped over my shoulders. The water was gone from my skin, but not from my heart. That heaviness stayed layered with all the times they'd left me out, forgotten birthdays, thankless pleas for money, mocking jokes about my old ways. Being shoved into the lake was just the first time they'd humiliated me in public. I slid open the nightstand drawer and pulled out my old journal. It had sat untouched for months, but tonight my hands shook with intention. On the very first line I scribbled, "They will never get the chance to drown me again." Hours later, when the house had finally gone quiet, I sat at my desk under the steady glow of the lamp. Sleep was impossible. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Jason's smirk, heard his laugh. And worse, I saw Mark standing by silent, letting it happen. I wanted to scream, not out of fear, but out of raw disbelief. How had we gotten to this point? When did I become expendable? My thoughts unraveled backward through the years, stitching the picture together. The casual put-downs, the jokes at my expense, Linda's eye rolls whenever I shared stories from my past, Mark brushing aside my advice like it was worthless. They had been pushing me to the margins for years. Jason had only been the one to deliver the final shove. But as the night wore on, something inside me shifted. I saw that I had a choice. I could stay in the role they'd written for me, quiet, compliant, convenient, or I could pick up the pen and script my own ending. The next morning, I moved through the kitchen with steady steps, even though my joints ached. Jason barely lifted his eyes from his phone. Mark muttered good morning without ever looking up. Linda was already chirping about another dinner party, her voice cheerful but hollow. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table, and simply watched. Watched every careless comment, every dismissive glance. I wasn't furious anymore, not exactly. What I felt was colder, sharper. A kind of resolve. I opened my journal again, and beneath the first line I wrote, "This silence is not weakness, it's a warning." That was the day I quit making excuses for them. The day I stopped clinging to the memory of who Jason used to be. The day I decided they would learn not from shouting, not from fists, but through absence, through clarity, through the weight of what I could take away. They thought I was sinking. They hadn't seen anything yet. The morning after that barbecue, I found myself standing in front of Jason's old guitar, leaning dusty in the corner of the living room. The strings were frayed, one long broken, but I could still remember the day I brought it home. Jason had been 10, his face lighting up like I'd just given him the stars. He sat cross-legged on the rug, strumming clumsy chords, and told me, "Grandpa, this is better than Christmas." Now, years later, that same boy had shoved me into a lake and laughed while I struggled to breathe. I reached out, brushed my fingers across the weathered wood, and felt the crush of two truths. At once the joy of what was and the sting of what is. That guitar wasn't just an instrument. It was proof of every sacrifice I'd made to give him a better shot at life. I once believed love alone would be enough, that pouring everything into a child would protect them from the world's sharp edges. But I learned the hard way that love can be twisted, abused, taken as entitlement. When Jason was 6, Mark had lost his job. Linda was restless, complaining about money, about feeling trapped. They dropped Jason at my place for a few weeks. Weeks became months. Months slid into years. By the time Jason hit middle school, I was the one signing report cards, attending parent-teacher conferences, paying for his braces. I didn't resent it. I told myself it was my responsibility, my blessing even. I had the time, the patience, the love to give. Back then, Jason would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching his blanket and whispering, "Don't let go, Grandpa." And I never did. Not once. But somewhere between that trembling little boy and the teenager who stood on that dock last night, something shifted. I can almost point to the year. At 16, Jason stopped meeting my eyes. Stopped saying thank you, stopped sitting down with me for breakfast. The glow of a phone replaced real conversations. At first I blamed myself, too old-fashioned, maybe out of touch. Maybe I just didn't understand kids anymore. But deep down, I saw it. The smirk when I told a story. The eye roll when I asked about school. The way he dismissed me like background noise. And Mark, he never corrected him. If anything, he made it worse, laughing right alongside his son when Jason mocked me. Linda, polished and perfect for her social crowd, twisted the knife further. She'd say things like, "Oh, Dad gets confused sometimes," even when she knew I hadn't. Each jab chipped away at Jason's respect until nothing remained. And the worst part, I allowed it. I told myself to keep the peace. I told myself it was just teenage rebellion. I told myself he'd grow out of it. I wanted harmony so badly that I swallowed my pride, buried my hurt, and kept hoping. Hope can be a dangerous thing when it blinds you to the truth sitting right in front of you. I should have spoken the very first time Jason rolled his eyes at me in front of his buddies. I should have corrected him when he tossed old man at me instead of grandpa. I should have spoken up when Linda joked at church that I was starting to slip. Instead, I swallowed it all smiling, as if none of it touched me. I let Jason believe he was clever. And by doing that, I allowed myself to fade away, slowly, quietly, right out of my own family's picture. I sank into the couch, laid the guitar across my lap, and strummed one of the few chords still left in my hands. The sound came out thin, hollow. Nothing like the bright notes Jason used to bring out of it. Still, the memory came flooding back. Jason at 11, his hands too small to press the strings, but fire in his eyes. "I'm going to be a musician one day, Grandpa. I'm going to make you proud." I grinned at him then and said, "I already am proud." Now I can't help but wonder, does he even remember saying it? Does he remember the nights we stayed up late, me scribbling chords on scrap paper for him to practice? Does he remember the vacation I gave up the money I scraped together, just so he could have what he wanted, or had all of that washed away, replaced by the toxic lessons he picked up from his parents? That image matters more than kindness. That cruelty is confidence. That family is just another rung on the ladder. From the kitchen drifted laughter pulling me out of the past. Jason's laugh again, sharp, cutting, echoing down the hall. A trigger. I set the guitar aside, my hands trembling, not from age, but from what I now understood. Jason hadn't changed overnight. I had seen it unfolding bit by bit, year after year, and I had chosen silence every time. And silence had left me here, pushed into a lake mocked by the same boy I once carried on my shoulders. I walked back to my room, closed the door, and sat at my desk, where a box of his old school projects still sat stacked. Construction paper covered with crooked handwriting, stick figure drawings, little essays about what he wanted to be. One paper caught my eye. "When I grow up, I want to build machines that help people breathe better. I want to help people like my grandpa who sometimes gets tired." I held that paper so long my hands shook. The boy who wrote those words was gone. In his place stood a young man who laughed while I fought for air. I folded the paper, set it gently back in the box, and sat in stillness. That quiet had once been mistaken for weakness. Not anymore. Now, It was a vow. Later that evening, I sat with them at the dinner table. Mark went on about flights to Mexico. Linda scrolled through listings on her phone. Jason sat hunched over his screen, earbuds dangling. I cleared my throat and said, "Steady so." Mark looked up, caught off guard. "So what, Dad?" I forced a thin smile. "Nothing. Just seeing if anyone was listening." Jason chuckled, not even glancing up. "We hear you, old man." The words slid across the table like a blade. But instead of cutting me down, they carved something sharper inside me. Resolve. I lifted my glass, sipped the water, set it down softly and let their chatter roll on. They didn't realize it yet, but the ground beneath them had already shifted. That night before climbing into bed, I opened my journal once more. Beneath the line, "They will never get the chance to drown me again," I wrote. He stopped being my grandson long before he pushed me into the lake. The night I first put pen to page, sleep never came. The words stared back at me under the glow of the lamp. They will never get the chance to drown me again. I shut the journal, but the silence pressed heavy against the walls of my room. Sleep wouldn't come, not with their laughter echoing in my head. Jason's smirk, Mark's folded arms, Linda's wine glass raised. So instead, I slid open the desk drawer and pulled out my old laptop. The screen flickered, booting up slow, like even the machine was tired of being ignored. I typed in my password, something Jason would never guess, an old Army serial number from when I was barely older than he is now. For years, I'd kept neat digital records of everything. Not because anyone ever asked me to, but because it mattered to me. I needed to know where my money went, where my time was spent, what I had worked to build for this family. Click by click, I opened the folders, bank accounts, savings bonds, the college fund I started when Jason was 10. Back when he looked at me like I was larger than life. There it was, $50,000 untouched. I once called it a foundation for his future. A future I believed would be built on respect. Now it felt more like a chain dragging me under. The house was quiet except for the steady hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I thought I was alone until I heard it. Jason's voice, low, muffled, drifting from the hallway. I froze, fingers stiff over the keyboard. "College fund's basically mine," he said. My stomach clenched. I eased the laptop closed, careful not to make a sound, and leaned closer, listening through the thin wall between my room and the living room, where he'd probably crashed on the couch again. "Once the old man's gone," Jason said. "Dad says it's set. That's what, 50 grand easy. I'll transfer it once he's out of the picture." My blood ran cold. Out of the picture. That's what I was to him. A picture. Something to remove, discard, hang on a wall if convenient, but erase when it cluttered the frame. I sank back in my chair, my hands trembling not from age, but from the shock of hearing my own grandson plot my absence like it was just math. For years I had blamed myself for the distance between us. Maybe I'd been too patient, too soft, too willing to overlook the small cruelties. But in that moment, I saw the truth. Jason hadn't just drifted. He'd been molded by a father who never owned his failures, by a mother who measured worth in appearances and money, and now by his own hunger for more. I opened my journal again, scrawled furiously beneath last night's vow. They think I'm just a fund to be transferred. They forget I'm still the one holding the pen. That pen, small, ordinary, suddenly felt heavier than any weapon I'd carried. In ink, I had power. In ink, I could tilt the ground beneath them without ever raising my voice. The next morning, I went through the motions. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. The ritual almost felt like a cruel joke, pretending we were still some kind of family. Jason shuffled in, yawning, glued to his phone. He didn't look at me. He just scooped eggs onto a plate and slumped into a chair. "Morning," I said evenly. "Yeah," he muttered, already lost in his screen. I watched him chew, hunched and careless, already moving past the venom of last night, as if it never happened. Mark walked in a few minutes later, dressed for work, tugging at a tie he hated crooked. Linda followed soon after, flawless as ever, her perfume filling the room. "Dad, could you?" Mark began, but I cut him off with a look. "Not today," I said calmly. He blinked confused, then shrugged. He wasn't used to me setting boundaries. He was used to me saying yes. When they left, I sat at the table alone. My eggs had gone cold, untouched. I opened the newspaper, but the words swam. All I could hear was Jason's voice. "Once the old man's gone." I wrote those exact words in my journal, circled them twice, then underlined "gone." To them, my absence was inevitable, just a matter of time. What they hadn't considered was me choosing the terms. That afternoon, I climbed up to the attic. The air smelled of dust and cedar. The space crowded with boxes no one had touched in years. I pulled down a metal tin where I'd stored the important things: birth certificates, property deeds, insurance papers. My hands traced each folder, as if reacquainting myself with old comrades. At the very bottom was the trust document, the one I signed after surgery, the one that safeguarded Jason's education fund. I read it slowly, word for word, the way I once read him bedtime stories. But there was no magic in these lines, only clarity. The fund was in my name. The authority was mine. No transfer could happen without my signature. Jason's confidence wasn't rooted in fact. It was built on assumption, on arrogance. That was his weakness. And I intended to let him cling to it. Let him dig himself deeper until he couldn't climb back out. That evening, Linda hosted one of her little get-togethers, yoga friends' neighbors. The kind of crowd where she loved to perform her role as flawless hostess. Her smile polished her remarks sharp, but disguised as wit. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, wiping down counters that didn't need wiping. But I listened. I always listened. Through the chatter and clinking glasses, Jason's voice carried. "Grandpa fell in the lake yesterday, flailing like a turtle on its back. You should have seen it. Hilarious." A roar of laughter followed. My grip tightened on the counter until my knuckles went white. And then Linda, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate, but loud enough for me to hear, "He's becoming a liability." I told Mark we can't drag this out. We need to think about the future, not sentiment. Liability. That word sank in my chest heavier than the lake water had. I wanted to walk in to confront them. I wanted to throw their failures back at them, to remind them of the nights I stayed up through Jason's asthma attacks, the checks I wrote to keep this roof over all their heads, the dinners I cooked, the lawns I cut, the sacrifices I never once kept score of. But I didn't. Instead, I dried my hands on the dish towel, flicked off the kitchen light, and walked to my room. Because rage was what they expected. Silence was what they dismissed. But in the right hands, silence can cut sharper than fury. Back in my room, I pulled my journal close. My handwriting came slower this time, deliberate. Each letter pressed deep into the paper. They mock my struggle. They call me a liability. But the liability is theirs, and they don't even see it yet. I underlined theirs, shut the book, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled. The morning after Linda's little dinner party, I brewed the coffee stronger than usual. My hands still shook, not from weakness, but from the memory of their laughter spilling through the patio doors while they called me a liability. The house was hushed now. Jason had gone out late and hadn't come back. Mark was off early for work. Linda lingered upstairs, no doubt, scrolling through rental listings, convincing herself she deserved the life she liked to show off. I stood at the sink, staring out at the lake that had nearly taken me. The water looked calm, glassy, but it mocked me just the same. A few ripples cut across the surface, whispering, "You survived. But what will you do now?" A knock at the side door broke the silence. Not the front, never the front, Only one person ever came through the side. I opened it, and there stood Frank Dawson, my oldest friend. Frank never asked permission, he never needed to. He nudged the door open with his elbow, balancing a brown paper sack in one hand and 2 styrofoam cups in the other. "Morning, Ed," he said, squinting over his thick glasses. "You look like hell." "Nice to see you too," I muttered, the corner of my mouth almost twitching into a smile. "Sit," he ordered, plunking the bag onto the table. "I'll pour." And I did, because that's what you did with Frank. He was a retired sergeant. The uniform was long gone, but the command never left his voice. He handed me a cup of steaming black coffee. "Drink, then talk." I stared into it, buying time. Finally, I said, "They pushed me." His eyebrows shot up. Into the lake, I nodded once. "Jesus, Ed." He leaned back, whistling low. "And nobody helped you." They laughed. I answered flatly. Silence weighed between us, broken only by the refrigerator's hum. Frank tapped his fingers slow on the table. "Then it's time," he said. I frowned. Time for what? He reached into his jacket pocket and slid an envelope across the table like a poker hand. Inside, a business card. Clean font, straight to the point, Thomas Green Estate Law. I looked up sharply. "You kept this." "I keep everything," Frank said, "especially when my best friend's giving away his life's work like Halloween candy to people who'd rather watch him drown." The card felt heavier in my hand than it had any right to. "I don't know, Frank," I said quietly. "It feels so final." "You want final," he shot back. "What you don't want is guilt. That's different." I rubbed at my temple. I wanted to help Jason. I wanted him to have chances I never had. "And you gave him those chances," Frank said firmly. "You paid for Brace's soccer camps. You even bought that damn guitar he doesn't touch anymore. You let Mark and Linda live here rent-free that summer, remember? And you still had to scrape for groceries that August." I winced. I had almost forgotten. I just wanted to help. I whispered, "I know you did." Frank said, his voice softening. "You're better than them. That's the problem." We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee. Outside, the lake shimmered deceptively peaceful. Finally, Frank leaned forward. "Listen, Ed. You don't need revenge. You need release. There's a difference." I stared at him, the words sinking in. Release. That was it. I didn't want to hurt them. I just wanted to stop being hurt by them. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "Start here," Frank said, tapping the card. "Call Green. Tell him the truth. Every brutal detail. Let him lead you." My chest tightened. "If I do this, Frank, it means cutting Jason out." Frank's eyes didn't budge. "Kid cut himself out the second he shoved you into that lake." The truth landed like a stone, impossible to deny. I shut my eyes. Jason's grin, the freezing water. Mark and Linda's silence flickered through again. When I opened them, Frank was still locked on me, steady. "You're not alone, Ed. Not anymore. You've got me, and you've got that pen in your hand." I looked down and realized my journal was still open on the table. The ink from last night glistened faintly under the kitchen light. They mock my struggle. They call me a liability, but the liability is theirs, and they don't even see it yet. The phone buzzed against the wood. Face down, I flipped it over voicemail notification. Unknown number. I pressed play. "Mr. Miller, this is Thomas Green's office returning your inquiry. We can set an appointment this week if you're available. Please call back." I turned to Frank, stunned. He smirked faintly. "I may have nudged the process along. You called him?" "I told you," Frank leaned back with a grin. "I keep everything, including promises I made to your wife before she passed. She told me once, if Ed ever forgets his worth, remind him." So here I am, my throat locked up, eyes burning. The mention of Margaret always cut through whatever armor I built. She had believed in me when no one else did. "Damn it, Frank," I muttered, blinking hard. "Don't thank me," he said, rising. "Thank yourself when you finally quit letting them write your story." He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Call green today." And then he slipped out the side door, leaving behind the faint smell of coffee and old loyalty. I sat there staring at the card. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt armed. That afternoon, I dialed the number. The line clicked. "Law Offices of Thomas Green." A crisp voice. My mouth was dry, but I forced the words. "This is Edward Miller. I need an appointment." When I hung up, I looked toward the lake again. The water was calm, but I knew better. Beneath the glassy surface, currents shifted, waiting. This time, I wouldn't be the one dragged under. Thomas Green's office smelled like paper and consequence. Not the dusty kind, the kind that says, "What you sign here will outlast anyone trying to outtalk it." The windows faced east, slicing late morning sunlight across framed degrees. His receptionist, a calm woman with steel-gray hair, Nora Vance, led me in, offered water, then closed the door with a click that felt like a seal. Thomas stood. "Mr. Miller," he said, crossing the rug with his hand already outstretched. "I'm Green. Thank you for coming on short notice." His handshake wasn't perfunctory. It was steady, dry, present, the kind that made you feel seen without being dissected. I realized how long it had been since I'd shaken a hand that didn't want something. "Call me Edward," I said. "Or Ed, if that makes it easier to tell me hard things." He smiled the way good lawyers do, kindness wrapped around an unblinking core. "All right, Ed. Please have a seat." I sat. The leather didn't creak. I liked that. He didn't waste time. "You mentioned on the phone you have a grandson, Jason, and that there's an education fund in your name." 50,000, I said. "Set aside when he was 10, still untouched." He nodded, already knowing Frank must have told him enough to begin. Thomas opened a slim folder. I saw copies of my signatures dated. I remembered each one like a birthday, the day I decided to believe in a boy who once brought me dandelions like gold. "Is access still solely yours?" he asked. "Yes," I swallowed. "They assume otherwise." His eyes lifted. "Assume how? My grandson's told people it's his. My son Jason's father talks like the future's already written. My daughter-in-law throws around words like liability." I forced that last word out. Even here it tasted like rust. Thomas didn't write it down. He let it sit in the room where it belonged. "Okay," he said softly. "Then there are two conversations we can have. One is about money. The other is about boundaries." "Which one keeps me breathing?" I asked. "Both," he said, clicking his pen. The sound was quiet but ceremonial. First, he said, "Let's lock the doors that don't exist." He turned his notepad so I could see his list. "We'll audit every account. Anything that requires your signature gets extra steps. No e-signatures past 48 hours. No online access without a physical token. Alerts on every inquiry. Credit frozen at all 3 bureaus. A safe deposit box at a credit union, your key only. New mailing address for financial papers. If they're counting on drift, we stop the tide." It was clean, legal, exact, and steadier than the lake had ever made me feel. "And second," I asked. His gaze held mine. "We draw your life in ink exactly how you want it. Power of attorney, health and financial, given to someone you trust, a directive witnessed. A will with a no-contest clause. A letter of intent I'll read when you ask, even if you're not in the room." I exhaled slow. Margaret's voice came back. "If you're going to be quiet, make sure the paper speaks." "Frank as proxy," I said. "If not him, then Nora. Not Mark, not Linda." Thomas noted it without a question. then flipped to a fresh page. Tell me about Jason. I did. Not everything, but enough. The guitar, the asthmanites, the dandelions, the shove. When I finished, his pen rested still. He let silence sit where it belonged. I'm sorry, he said, and it wasn't empty. I don't want revenge, I told him. I want release. His mouth curved faintly. Frank's word wasn't new to him. Then we structure the release one piece at a time. He tapped the first list. My office calls the credit bureaus today. You stop at Glenview Credit Union for a safe deposit box. Originals stay there. We'll set a P.O. box. Change your banking phone number to one only you and I hold. Order a security token for the education fund. No token, no movement. And the fund, I asked. Your call. Close, redirect, freeze, or he raised a brow. Let it sit while you watch how people act when they think time is theirs. I want to watch, I said. The words came out colder than I expected, but they fit. I want to see how they treat me when they think I'm leaving, while I'm the one choosing the door. Then we leave it, he agreed, scribbling a title, The Room. I almost smiled. You'll keep your journal, he added. Dates, times, facts. Your feelings matter, but in court, facts move the needle. If anyone calls you confused, we'll out-document their certainty. My daughter-in-law's friends already whisper the word, I muttered. They like diagnosis as gossip. Thomas slid a plain pamphlet across the desk. Then we test the room while you're in it. Not required, but smart. A neutral evaluator meets you here, no fuss. We file the letter, Mr. Miller demonstrates decisional capacity. It's not ammo, it's a seatbelt. I laughed short. I was an engineer. I like seatbelts. Good, he said. We'll buckle more. Nora set a glass of water by my elbow. Bureaus are on hold, she told Thomas, then looked at me. Can I copy your ID now, Mr. Miller? You can, I said. Thank you, Nora. She took my wallet like it carried weight, not money, but meaning. When the door closed, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. Not like in the kitchen, gripping the counter while they laughed outside. Ed, Thomas said, drawing me back. There's something you should know. I pulled the inquiry history on your fund. He slid over a printout. Last month before your call, someone phoned the custodian listed as authorized family, asking about steps in case of incapacity. The caller ID, your son. The room didn't spin. My stomach didn't sink. A month ago it would have. Now the information slotted into place like a gear clicking home. Thomas studied my face for a crack. When it didn't come, he nodded as if we'd passed a test together. They didn't get anywhere, he said. Your documents list no authorized family. The custodian told them they'd need a court guardianship to move anything. It's not nothing, it tells us intent. That's enough, I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant for him to stop talking or that the facts explained more than I wanted to face. Thank you. Do you want me to send a letter to Mark? He asked. Put him on notice that future attempts will be recorded. Not yet, I said. Let them think I'm blind. I want the rope they're so eager to throw, and to see how they use it. Understood, he said, and I believed him. We worked the list like men repairing a bridge. He dictated Nora, returned forms appeared. I initialed where yellow tabs told me signed, where the lines demanded. I named Frank as my medical proxy, adding a clause that would have made Margaret proud. In case of incapacity, my agent alone decides placement. Not Mark, not Linda, not her yoga friends. We added a no contest clause to the will. It won't stop rage, Thomas said, but it stops collection. What about the house, I asked, picturing the lake through the kitchen window. You're attached, he said gently. I am, but it won't become their trophy. Then options life estate deed to a land trust after you or sale with proceeds to a foundation you name. We don't have to file today. Hold it, I said. I want to see their shape before I choose the houses. Very well. He slid one last paper forward. This is the letter. We'll keep it in my file until you say. Not punishment record. He turned it so I could see. My own words stared back. To those who assumed my silence meant agreement. I gave everything once. I won't die twice. The rest was precise names spelled right, dates exact. The education fund redirected by my instruction. The deed to pass into trust if I chose. I signed not to send, but to have ready. Silence only matters if it has shape. When we finished, Thomas stood. Walk with me. He led me down a hall lined with photos, families in front of homes, older couples at long tables, a girl in a college hoodie holding a scholarship. He opened a frosted glass door to a small conference room, bare but for water and mints. This is where I read letters. Not dramatic. People expect fire. They get policy. Truth sounds louder that way. I could picture Mark there. Linda, too. Jason fidgeting with a coin. I could hear them muttering confused, unfair, cruel. And I could hear Thomas reply, no. Clear, legal, final. I didn't crave that moment. I felt steady knowing I could choose it. Nora reappeared efficient as ever. Credit freezes confirmed. Safe deposit box set at Glenview for 2. P.O. box reserved under your full name. Banks requiring in-person tokens listed here. Token for the education fund requested. Evaluator Friday at 10. Discreet entrance. Thank you, I said. The stack of small lawful victories should have felt like paper. Instead, it felt like armor. Thomas walked me back to gather my things. At the door, he paused. Ed, one more thing. If you disappear into something. People do better walking toward than away. I'm not vanishing into a hole, I said. I'm moving into a life where quiet isn't punishment. He smiled. Good. And when they say you ran, remember doors aren't escapes. They're choices. We shook hands again. Less an ending, more a handoff. I took my hat, nodded to Nora, and stepped out. The elevator hummed, numbers ticking down like a calm pulse. In the lobby, a child tugged his mother toward a plant. She smiled and let him touch the leaves. Funny what you notice once you stop bracing for impact. Outside, the air was clean. The city sounded ordinary, a delivery truck, a man on the phone, a dog tugging for the sidewalk. I breathed deep and the breath went somewhere useful. Glenview Credit Union sat a couple miles from my house, a plain brick building with a flag snapping in the breeze. The teller didn't know Jason's name. She didn't know Mark's or Linda's. She knew only procedures and the price of a key. Sign here, Mr. Miller. And here. I did. The safe deposit drawer slid from the wall like an old tool chest. Inside, I placed the trust originals, my marriage certificate, my discharge papers, and a photocopy of the first page of my journal dated in ink. I rested my hand on the stack, not to pray, but to witness it. Then I shut the lid and heard the firm click of the lock. At the post office, the clerk was young enough to be Jason's buddy, but polite in a way that said he'd been raised right. Here you go, Mr. Miller, he said, sliding me a brass key. Box 451. Anything you want forwarded. Not yet, I told him. Soon. Back in the car, I called Frank. How'd it go? No greeting needed. Green knows where to put the walls, I said. We built a few. Even picked a door. Frank chuckled low and steady like an old truck engine that never quits. That's my guy. The line went quiet. You all right, Ed? Measured, I answered. Feels like the first day I knew which way was north. If you stumble, call. I'll be at the corner with a flashlight. We hung up without ceremony. Instead of heading home, I parked near the small public garden Margaret loved, wedged between a drugstore and a barbershop where old men argued sports. Tomatoes climbed the stakes. A painted sign read, Take what you need, leave what you can. I sat on a bench, letting the sun warm the shoulder that still ached when it rained. The lake would be calm back at the house. Jason would be asleep untouched by consequence. Linda hunting for resorts that photographed well. Mark staring at spreadsheets, wondering why life felt smaller than promised. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I chose ink over noise. Today I chose doors over docks. Today I learned the opposite of drowning isn't swimming. It's standing on solid ground." I drew myself. A breeze shifted the page. I let it. When I got home, their cars filled the driveway, but the house felt nudged a little to the side. Linda's voice floated from the back, fussing about someone's salad dressing. Mark's steps thudded upstairs. Jason's game rattled behind a closed door. I moved through the kitchen without apology. From the drawer, I pulled the key to the garage door keypad, held it, then set it back. Not yet. I wasn't shutting them out. I was securing myself in. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Friday at 10 works. Ask for the side entrance. TG, the side entrance. Fitting. I turned off the lamp over the sink. The house exhaled the way houses do when someone makes a choice inside them. I walked the hall past Jason's crooked school photos, past the closet where my old parka still hung. In my room, the lake shimmered small through the window. A coin tossed on the surface of a life left behind. I cracked the window just enough to hear the lake, not for comfort, but for measure. That sound had been my clock for years, and it would mark this moment too. At my desk, I lined up the day's keys, one for the safe deposit box, one for the post office, one for the house still in my name. I placed Thomas Green's card beside them. Then carefully, I pulled a fresh envelope from the drawer and addressed it to myself at box 451. Inside, I slid a photocopy of the letter Thomas would read if I asked. On the flap in block letters, when ready. I sealed it, set it aside, and opened my journal. At the bottom of the page, I sketched a small square door, lightly shaded, outline left clean. That's when I heard it, the slam of the front door. Not rage, just careless. Voices followed. Mark's flat, Linda's sharp, Jason's restless. The house resumed its old play, me only backstage. Dad Mark called not entering, just tossing the word like a coin into a fountain. In here, I said, voice steady. He didn't come closer. He didn't need me, just the version of me he expected. Linda and I are thinking of getting away for a few days, he said from somewhere down the hall. You'll manage, right? I always have, I answered. He didn't hear it the way I meant it, or maybe he did and ignored it. Their voices faded down the hall like weather you no longer have to stand in. I shut the journal. The lake's sound kept time. Friday at 10 would come. I'd sit in a quiet room with a neutral mind, buckling a seatbelt around my own life. After that, more paper, more locks, more doors, some to shut, some to open. I thought of Thomas's handshake that morning, not a bell ending, but the tap of a baton before the music shifts. The room was drawn, the pieces in place, the pen heavier now than laughter had ever been. I switched off the lamp. The hallway held its shape. In the dark, you learn to move by touch. The walls stayed where they'd always been. The doorknob turned like it always had. But I was different in the doorway. The house didn't know it yet. Jason didn't know. Mark and Linda certainly didn't. But the floor beneath us had shifted quietly, legally, permanently. Tomorrow I'd water the tomatoes at the community garden. Stop by Glen View for another key. Bring Frank a coffee and tell him about the lawyer's peppermint room where truth echoed louder than anger. My voice would stay level, my steps measured, my silence shaped. And when Friday came, I'd walk through the side entrance like a man who no longer needed to be announced in his own life. I left a plain envelope on the kitchen counter where afternoon sun would find it. Nothing fancy. Just manila block letters spelling Mark's name. Inside 3 ordinary sheets, a grocery list, an old lawn invoice, and a blank check with my name crossed out thick. Not a trick. A mirror to see who looked when no one was supposed to. I poured coffee, slow waiting. From the hall came Linda's heels, click, pause, click. A rhythm of ownership. She swept into the kitchen in a silk blouse too bright for the hour phone in hand, like a second pulse. She didn't say good morning, she never did, unless there was an audience. Her eyes landed on the envelope. "Mark," she called, her voice sweet on the surface steel beneath. "There's something for you. Hold it." Mark answered from the den without moving. Linda held it, then didn't. She slipped a manicured nail under the flap like she'd been invited to. Paper whispered open. I didn't turn my head, just let the coffee steam fog my glasses. The pause told me when she saw the blank check. The huff told me she didn't like the thick line of ink slashed through my name. "It's a grocery list," she said flat, setting the papers down too neatly, the way people do when they want you to notice they looked and found nothing. Jason wandered in, earbuds glued in. He spotted the envelope, glanced at me, then his mother. "What's that?" "Nothing," Linda said quickly. "Just a reminder, your grandfather needs milk." Jason smirked. "DoorDash exists, Mom. Be useful," she snapped. Whatever he muttered, scrolling already. I sipped my coffee, letting the moment pass. The envelope wasn't a trap. It was a measurement where their eyes went when money might be near. Not to me, not to the room, but to the paper. Later, I wrote in my journal, "They reach for envelopes, not hands." By mid-morning, the house emptied. Linda left for Pilates and polish. Mark for a job that fit like a suit 2 sizes small. Jason back to his cave of whispers and LED glow. I cleared the counter muscle memory and turned on the little kitchen radio Margaret once kept by the spice rack. Classical music, slow and steady. From the drawer, I pulled my pillbox, Monday through Sunday, stamped clear, and set it on the table. Thomas's words echoed. "If they call you confused, outdo their certainty." The pillbox sat as proof. Every slot full, every dose counted. I didn't need to show competence for me, I needed it for the record. Still, I let the glass clink a beat too long against the sink. The old pride in me resisted, standing tall, refusing to perform. But this wasn't performance. It was signaling in the only language Mark and Linda seemed to know, liability convenience. Footsteps on the deck pulled me back. Through the screen door appeared Mrs. Carter, my neighbor, 2 houses over. Broad-shouldered, quick, the same way she'd always greeted Margaret, like the mesh wasn't a barrier, but an invitation. "Edward," she called, tapping lightly. "You got a minute always?" I said and meant it. She stepped in, carrying a carton of eggs and a jar of peach preserves. "Farmer's market." I bought extra, which in her language meant I bought them for you. "How are you?" she asked, not idly. "Vertical," I said, "and grateful." She set the eggs down, studying my face with a care that made lying pointless. "I heard the commotion the other night," she said softly. "Sound carries on the lake. You know where I am if you need anything." I nodded. "Thank you, Ruth." "Mrs. Carter," she corrected with the same wink she'd used for years. "Save the first name for when I swear." Then after a pause, "You look steady to me. If anyone says otherwise, send them to me." That simple pledge, just proximity and decency, hit harder than it should have. My throat tightened the way it used to, when Margaret would rest her hand on my arm at a party, reminding me what home felt like. "Do you need a ride anywhere this week?" she asked. "I'm heading into town Friday for a haircut. 10 Husrow." "I have an appointment then," I said, matching her tone. "Side entrance." She smiled like she understood more than I'd said. "Good," she answered, giving the pillbox a gentle pat as if blessing it. "Doors, Edward. Use them." When she left, I wrote a line in my journal, "And if they whisper facility, I will answer with witnesses." At noon, my phone buzzed with a number I no longer feared. Thomas Green's voice came calm. 2 things. First, the physical token was shipped. Should arrive at your P.O. box tomorrow. Second, someone tried an online inquiry into your education fund. Denied. IP traced back to your son's office. No action yet unless you want me to. I don't, I replied, surprised at how steady I sounded. Let them waste time on doors that don't open. Very well, he said, warmer now. You sound measured. I am. Thank you, Thomas. Friday at 10. Nora will meet you outside. Copy that, I said, an old phrase slipping out before we hung up. I set the phone down, watching sunlight crawl across the kitchen tile like a clock I could finally trust. By late afternoon, the house filled again. Mark came home dragging exhaustion like a coat he couldn't shed. Linda spoke in motion as if stillness would weigh her down. Jason hovered restless and hungry, confusing wants for needs. Dad, Mark said from my doorway, not stepping inside. Small thing, my card got flagged today. Weird timing. Did you change something with the bank? I kept my face open, voice even. I changed many things today, I said. All of them mine. Linda appeared behind him, her timing precise. No need to be cryptic, she said lightly. It's just easier if we loop you in when we need to help, that's all. You've been looping me in, I answered. For years. Jason sprawled onto the couch, muttering through a yawn. This is so dramatic. His favorite word for pain that wasn't his. I let it drift past like a cloud. I'll make dinner, I said, not penance, just choice. Order in, eh? Linda suggested. Faster, I'll cook. I'll make it, I repeated. Sometimes the quietest rebellion is refusing to outsource proof you're fine. I boiled pasta garlic, the good olive oil Margaret used to smile at. The rhythm of chopping steadies men like me, small work, real warmth. I salted the water like a prayer. Set 4 plates not for company, but for the record I hadn't withdrawn humanity to keep control. We ate forks against plates, TV, murmuring a game I no longer followed. Halfway through, Linda set her fork down, already bored. I found a number for a placement specialist, she said, casual. Just informational. These things have wait lists, you know. Placement, Mark echoed, like tasting the word might soften it. Don't be naive, Linda pressed. If we ever needed to move quickly, I'd rather have our ducks in a row. Jason snorted. Ducks. I set my fork down. Say the whole sentence, I told her. What? She blinked, smile stiffening. Say it the way you say it when you think I can't hear. Facility, I said for her. She inhaled, then exhaled through her nose. We're trying to be responsible, Edward. The last time you tried to be responsible, I reminded, I paid your property taxes. Mark's chair scraped. Dad. I raised a steady hand. I'm not angry. I'm observing. Linda looked away first. That mattered. We're just planning, she said. You're making this adversarial. Planning is good, I said. I do it all the time. Jason rolled his eyes. So what, Grandpa, you want us to pretend you're not getting older? That you didn't almost drown? Pretend, I repeated, tasting the word. No good. Linda jumped in quickly. Then help us help you. We could do a tour just to see. No commitment. Friday at 10, I said evenly. I have an appointment. I'll be seen. Seen by who? Mark asked. A neutral, I said. Someone who writes letters that say he decides for himself. The pause stretched. Linda recovered first. Oh, Edward, no one's questioning. You are, I said, calm. That's all right. I prefer things on paper. Jason shoved his chair back. This is ridiculous, he snapped, leaving his plate half full. Waste was invisible to him as effort had always been. Mark stared at the tablecloth pattern like it held a map out of the room. "We're trying," he muttered. "I know," I said. I didn't add the wrong things. I rose, carried my plate to the sink, and let the hot water run, filling the silence with something better than their voices. That night, after dishes empty talk, the canned laughter of sitcoms. I sat on my bed with my journal. I wrote 3 lines stacked like stones. They want a tour of endings. I booked a confirmation of the beginning. Silence is not absence. It's leverage. I closed the book, switched off the lamp. The house creaked as always. Outside, the lake kept its quiet, sometimes the only mercy water can offer. Thursday errands in disguise. I took the long route to the post office through the community garden. Tomatoes blushed with success. An older man in a straw hat and back brace nodded the way men do when they recognize the dignity of simply trying. At the post office, my brass key found box 451 without hesitation. Inside, a padded mailer with the security token Thomas had promised and a sheet confirming the freeze with the date. I liked dates. They locked the truth into place so no one could argue it was opinion. On the drive back, I stopped at Frank's. His porch always looked like a museum of retired grit old boots lined straight a flag. Folded neat in a shadow box, coffee rings etched into the table like medals. He opened the door before I knocked. "You look like a man with a checklist," he said, stepping aside. "I look like a man with a key," I replied, holding up the token. Frank barked a laugh. "God, I love technology when it makes thieves work for it." We sat. His coffee was strong enough to scrub an engine. I told him about the envelope, Ruth Carter's visit, Thomas's call dinner, and Linda's word facility. Frank didn't cut in much. When I finished, he exhaled. "You handled that table like a surgeon. No need to swing a bat when a scalpel will do." "I don't want to cut them," I said. "I know," he answered. "But sometimes the only way not to bleed out is to stitch yourself shut." He glanced at the lake through the back window. "You ready for tomorrow?" "I am," I said. "Side entrance." He saluted me with his mug. "I'll be parked 2 blocks away. I won't hover, but I'll be there." "Thank you," I said, standing tired in a way work never causes tired from finally waking up. "Ed," he called after me. "You don't owe them a tour." "I know," I said. "I owe myself a letter." That night a storm rolled in, not fierce but steady rain drumming the roof, the air sharp with summer's edge. Lightning stitched the sky once or twice. The lake shivered. Jason was on the phone late, voice raised, so it carried. "It's stupid," he told whoever was listening. "He's playing games. If he were decent, he'd just hand it over. It's not like he can use it. Community college is a joke." I stood in my doorway, letting the words move through me like a draft. Margaret used to say, "Hurt people pronounce the world wrong." I finally understood she hadn't meant grammar. Sleep came jagged. I dreamed of doors opening into halls I built myself of pens, sketching maps that matched the ground. Friday morning, I woke before the alarm. The house was quiet in that certain way, when it doesn't yet know something is about to change. I showered, shaved carefully, chose the shirt Margaret always said made me look rested. I filled the pillbox, boiled the kettle, ate toast. On a sticky note, I wrote 3 words. I decided this and tucked it into my pocket like armor. At 9:30, I called out, "I'm heading out." Mark's voice drifted from upstairs, blurred. Linda said nothing. Jason mumbled something that sounded like, whatever. Not a send-off, just evidence I'd told them and left. I drove steady the way men do when the choice is already made. I parked 2 blocks away near a tree that had split the sidewalk years ago and never apologized. At the stop sign, a truck idled. Frank lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in silent salute. I nodded back. Enough. The side entrance was their plain door brass plaque bell button clicking under my thumb. The door opened. Nora Vance stood with clipboard in hand, smile warm without pity. "Mr. Miller," she said, "right on time. This way." We walked a short hallway to a small, bright room. 2 chairs, a plant too tough to kill. A woman about my age sat waiting with a folder on her lap. She stood when I came in, not out of duty, but respect, and offered her hand like it was second nature. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she said. "I'm Dr. Shirley Patel. We'll talk for about 45 minutes. It won't be a test, just a conversation where I write down what you already know." I smiled. That kind of conversation suited me. We sat. She asked for the date. I gave it. She asked the president's name. I answered. Then she moved into harder questions, my finances, choices, and wishes if I could no longer make them. We spoke of Margaret, of Frank, of the pillbox, of the lake, though we never said its name, of Jason without condemning him, of Mark without forgiving too much, of Linda without letting her define the center of my life. Halfway through, she paused. "What do you want, agency?" "And quiet," I said. "That's earned." She wrote it as if it were a diagnosis. At the end, she set her pen aside. "Mr. Miller, it is my professional opinion you have decisional capacity. I'll send a letter to Mr. Green's office this afternoon. Would you like a copy mailed to you as well?" "Box 5118, I replied. We smiled, 2 people fluent in the same small language of competence. We shook hands, a finish line and a starting line at once. Nora walked me back toward the side door. Passing a conference room, I noticed the place where Thomas would one day read my letters aloud. It didn't scare me. It steadied me. Paper is a mercy when people try to edit you out loud. Outside, the rain had passed. The air smelled metallic, alive. Frank's truck was gone. Good. He trusted me to walk myself home. I drove the long way. The house waited, same as always. I carried the quiet in with me like luggage no one could claim. Jason looked up when I stepped into the kitchen, mostly to prove he wasn't looking. "How was your little appointment?" The word little did all the heavy lifting. "Satisfying," I said. Linda's eyes narrowed. "What kind of appointmentational?" I echoed her phrase back, clean of fingerprints. Mark hovered uneasy. "Everything okay, Dad? Hey, Dad?" "Better than okay," I said. "Documented." They didn't know how to handle that word. They didn't like the floor shifting beneath someone else. I made tea, set 1 cup on the table. Didn't offer to pour for anyone else, not from spite, but from clarity. The afternoon unspooled quietly. I watched the mail truck sputter to a stop. The carrier slid a small envelope into our box. Linda fetched the stack, flipped through, frowned, and set aside what wasn't hers. The white envelope addressed to P.O. Box 451 landed on the hall table. She either didn't notice or didn't care. It would wait until my walk. Before dinner, I opened my journal and wrote 1 line centered on the page so it could breathe. I am not confusing kindness with access anymore. The house creaked. The lake held still. Next door, Ruth Carter's radio hummed a hymn, sung in a voice old enough to remember when people sang for each other. I switched off the lamp and felt the day settle into me, not weight, but ballast. That night's sleep found me quickly. Not from exhaustion, but because for the first time in years, the next morning didn't demand I justify my existence. Friday had stamped the file. The cracks in the house down the hall where Mark, Linda, and Jason mistook convenience for love were already spreading. I didn't have to push. I just had to stop holding it together. In the dark, I whispered the words I'd folded into my pocket that morning. One last time before sleep, I decide this. They had turned my drowning into a party trick. It began with laughter on the patio, the kind that asks permission to be cruel and gets it. I was rinsing a mug in the kitchen when Jason's voice cut through the screen door like a dare. "Picture this," he said loud enough to outshout the music. Grandpa goes overboard, arms flailing, mouth open. "Help me, help me." Laughter rippled, glasses clinked. Someone asked, did he really say that Jason didn't miss a beat? He said a lot of things. He smirked, mostly water. The laughter came louder this time, bravery built on unkindness. I stayed inside, hands wet, letting the noise roll over me without dragging me under. Tough old man, one of Jason's friends mocked. Jason soaked it in. He's dramatic, he said, and I could hear Linda's smile and the hiss of her breath through polished teeth. I set the mug down gently in the sink, the only sound I could control. Beyond the yard, the lake hummed, refusing to take sides. A girl's voice broke in, tentative. What if he'd actually... He didn't? Jason cut her off, too clever to let facts slow him down. Besides, it's not like we don't have plans. Once he's placed, Dad says it's simpler. Paperwork, signatures, that sort of thing. The college fund, the house, there's a flow, you know. There it was. The math of me. I dried my hands. I could have pressed record, trapped the moment like an insect under glass. But I didn't need to. I had something stronger: dates, times, and the quiet certainty of memory. Who's hungry? Linda chimed in, smoothing it all over. We've got a spinach dip that'll change your life. Not mine, Jason shot back. Mine changes when the check clears. More laughter. Small, mean, proud of itself. I shut off the faucet. The house exhaled. In my head, I wrote the line I'd ink later. Tonight he performed my drowning for applause. Mark wandered in halfway through, drawn by garlic bread, or maybe guilt. He spotted me at the sink, set a hand against the doorframe. Dad, he said, voice cautious, like stepping onto thin ice. Son, I replied without turning. It's just stories, he offered weakly. You know how kids exaggerate. I do, I said. I set down the towel. I also know how fathers correct them. Mark stared at a spot over my shoulder. It was a joke. He tried again. It was a joke, I agreed. They're laughing. The sentence stood on its own. He backed out, retreating to easier smiles. The night moved on, footsteps, ice in glasses, songs vetoed with polite cruelty. I stayed in the kitchen, stacking plates that didn't need stacking. You learn after 65 years how to turn your back without letting anyone notice. The sliding door whispered open. A young woman slipped in, ponytail, mascara, heavy for daylight courage. She fiddled with napkins before speaking. Mr. Miller? She asked softly. Yes. I'm Kayla. I'm in Jason's math class. I'm sorry about what he said. The lake that's not funny. Her eyes held the kind of honesty that comes before it hardens. Thank you, I said. It isn't. She nodded, relieved, and slid back outside. Not all witnesses clap. By 8, the house exhaled its guests. Linda played her tidy lioness routine, prowling through leftovers and compliments. Jason vanished to his room with chips and echoes. Mark hauled a trash bag out, shoulders slumped under more than plastic. I sat at the table, opened my journal, and laid the night down in order. Not for myself, I already knew, but because paper prefers precision. 8:12 p.m. Jason. Once he's placed. 8:13 p.m. Linda, we've got plans. 8:20 p.m. Kayla apologizes. Witness, 19-ish, ponytail, brown eyes steady. When the facts were captured, I added one line. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. They carry my stories like currency. I carry theirs like receipts. The next morning, fog draped the lake like a shawl. Ruth Carter's yard hummed with bees. I stepped outside with the broom because my hands like to work when my head is sorting things out. From the walkway, Ruth Carter called out. Edward, she said, equal parts greeting and question. Ruth, I nodded. She carried a canvas tote, her face set like someone who'd decided to be brave before coffee. You should know, she said, voice lowered as she drew near. The kids posted a video last night. Just a clip. Jason reenacting the thing. She didn't say drown. Her granddaughter had shown her. Ruth shook her head, disappointed, but not surprised. It made the rounds. Not everyone laughed. I kept sweeping. The rhythm bought me time. Thank you for telling me. Do you want me to send it to someone, she asked. A pastor, a coach, sometimes daylight helps. The thought tugged at me, proof in daylight. But then I pictured Kayla's young, honest face and how small towns sometimes correct themselves. Not yet, I said. Sometimes daylight finds its own way. She studied me, then nodded. For what it's worth, she said, people remember who raised him. They also remember who didn't. People are kinder than I give them credit for, I said. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes they're just paying attention. When she left, I swept a few more pointless leaves and felt something lift in my chest. Not joy, not triumph, maybe gratitude. Gratitude that the world had a few more Kaylas and Carters than I'd feared. By 10, the town had opinions. That's what small towns do with their mornings, carry gossip down Main Street, stop for coffee circle past the church, double back to the row of shops where Linda bought wine she couldn't pronounce and pretended the price was subtle. Inside our house, we fell into our roles. Jason rolled out late loud, grinning like he'd won an award no one else wanted. So people are freaking out, he announced. It was a joke. Can't anyone take a joke? Maybe don't post it, Mark muttered, tired more than fatherly. I didn't. Jason shot back. Darren did. Or Mikey. I don't control what my friends think is funny. You control your mouth, I said, not from the doorway, like a ghost, but from my chair at the table, like a man who paid the bills. Jason looked at me, something flickering. Embarrassment, annoyance, mostly the discomfort of being called out. He scoffed, swallowed it, and reached for cereal like the box owed him a future. Linda stepped in with anger, dressed up as PR. This is ridiculous. People act like they never told a story. It's our family, our business. What you do to people in your family is everyone's business, I said almost gently. Edward, please, she pressed, meaning, don't make this harder to spin. We have a reputation. You do, I agreed. She couldn't tell if I'd confirmed or cut her down. Mark's phone rang. He checked the screen, hesitated, then stepped into the hall. I caught words drifting back, inappropriate, insensitive, our brand. He returned with his shoulders squared, jaw tight. Linda read him like she reads menus. What someone at work saw the clip, he said. HR wants to touch base about optics. Optics, Jason barked. It was a party. They don't care. They care, Mark snapped, surprising himself. They care that my kid looks like he's bragging about pushing an old man into a lake. The sentence hit the room like a plate meeting a table. No break, just a sound. You remember I didn't push, Jason said, defensive. I nudged. He lost his balance. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Some lies eat the teller from the inside. You don't have to feed them. Delete it, Mark said, already knowing the futility. Call your friends. Tell them to take it down. Jason rolled his eyes. You can't delete the internet, Dad. You can delete your mouth, Mark shot back, too late to make it sting. Linda placed a hand on his arm, not tenderness, but calculation. We'll get in front of it, she said, words shiny like a press release. We'll say Dad tripped. We rushed to help. Family joke taken out of context. We'll host a barbecue for the neighborhood. Kill it with kindness. Kill what I asked. She let the question fall. When the house had drained itself of strategies, I slipped out for a walk. The light was flat, kind edges blurred. I passed the community garden, nodded at the man with the back brace, and stopped near the benches by the pharmacy. 2 older women keepers of every story in town were mid-handoff. That boy should be ashamed, one said, earrings punctuating her words. He will be the other, replied, more schedule than prophecy. They noticed me. For a second, their faces rearranged into polite surprise, caught with my name in their mouths. Then one patted the bench. Mr. Miller. Sit if you want or don't. Just know some of us aren't laughing. Thank you, I said, carrying the gift home intact. That night I sent Thomas a short email, facts, only neighbors saw the video. Kayla apologized. HR flagged Mark about optics. I wasn't responding publicly. I didn't ask for advice, only a line in a file that rumor couldn't erase. His reply was simple and right. Noted. You're doing well. Noise tends to overestimate itself. TG. By late afternoon, Linda had a guest list. Sunday, she said, phone in hand, eyes alight like a hostess facing a winnable fight. Early dinner casual. We'll invite neighbors, lay out a spread, remind them what a gracious family looks like. Gracious, I repeated, tasting the word, like communion bread. We should try that. She smiled thinly. Jason was already texting. I'll invite the guys. We'll tell them it was a bit. Don't, Mark said, firmer than usual. Don't invite them. Why not? Because they laughed, he said. He didn't look at me, but the words carried weight. And because I have to work on Monday. For a beat, it felt like the ground between us was shared again. Then it passed. Everything does. Dad, Mark said carefully. If we host, could you show your face just for an hour? People like to see. See what I wanted to ask. A man who doesn't faint when you clap. A prop instead, I said. I'll be here. It's my house. That evening, Ruth Carter knocked with a loaf of bread still warm. Too much for one person, she said. So I'm sharing. Sunday, I asked. You coming? Wouldn't miss it. I like to see how people behave when they're putting on their best. We both smiled, honest, not cruel. Then she added, the pastor's wife asked if she should check on you. I told her you were documented. I laughed. You're efficient. I'm old, she said. Old people don't waste trips. That night, rain returned, a steady tapping at the windows like company. Jason's door stayed closed. Mark and Linda's voices rose, once then faded the way arguments do, when both sides realize they're just echoing themselves. At my desk, I laid out my small reliables, P.O. Box key, safe deposit key, Thomas's card, and Dr. Patel's note confirmation sent to Mr. Green of decisional capacity. I held it a moment longer than needed. It wasn't proof for me. It pinned their doubts where they couldn't wriggle. I wrote in my journal, the video did its work. I didn't need to push it. The lake spoke, the town answered. I will not clap. Sunday came with a blue sky so bright it looked artificial. Linda moved like choreography napkins, folded lemon water, a playlist she called Civility, which I called Noise, in linen. Neighbors trickled in with casseroles and pies that carried stories of their own. Ruth Carter arrived last, on purpose peach cobbler. In hand, hugging me full and firm. Edward, she whispered, we'll be around if you need anything. Ruth, I nodded, gratitude folded small. The patio filled and the show began. Linda laughed at a volume measured for ease. Mark told a tired but funny story about an office printer. Jason leaned on the railing phone, visible like bait. Glad you could all make it, Linda told the circle that had gathered to see if performance matched rumor. We wanted to make sure everyone knew Dad is fine. He tripped. Looked worse than it was. Family joke misunderstood. Eyes shifted toward me. I sipped my coffee and met them back with calm. I'm vertical, I said. A few chuckled politely. Jason couldn't help himself. And dramatic, he added, like a kid forced to stick the landing. Jason, Mark warned, too soft, not enough. That's when it happened. Kayla walked in with her mother. She looked at me first. I gave permission with a nod. Then she turned to Linda. Mrs. Miller, she said, polite but firm. I was there. It wasn't a joke. The circle fell silent the way it does when truth sits down uninvited. Linda's smile didn't break. It hardened. Sweetheart, she began. You know how stories? It wasn't a story. Kayla cut in. It happened. He fell. And people laughed. Her mother touched her elbow, proud, but cautious of the edge in her daughter's honesty. "We just wanted to say," she added gently. "We're sorry, Mr. Miller." She looked straight at me. Some of us didn't laugh. "Thank you," I said. It was enough. They moved on the patio, air tilting a few degrees. Conversations reformed like birds shifting mid-flight. Across the yard, Linda's eyes caught mine. Not anger calculation. How do I fix this and still look gracious? She lifted her glass anyway. "To family," she said, and half the patio echoed her, because people will toast if you shine bright enough. To witnesses, I muttered into my coffee too low for the crowd, clear enough for me. After the neighbors left, after the last hug and the last plate scraped like a confession, Linda sagged a little, her armor dented. Mark loosened his tie. Jason slammed upstairs, punctuation by doorframe. In the quiet, Mark asked Dad, "Do you want me to talk to him?" "You should," I said. "Because you're his father." He nodded but turned to the sink instead. Some men fight by washing dishes. Linda stood at the sliding door, staring at the lake like it owed her calm. "We did our best." "You saw that, right? I saw you," I said. She searched my face for a grade and left with the look of a woman who'd given herself a B. I wrote the day into my journal, small enough to carry. The mockery had left the dock, wandered town, and returned alone. I didn't feel vindicated, just verified. Verified lasts longer. That night I slept without edits, no rehearsed dreams, just earned rest. In the morning, a white envelope waited on the hall table, box 45108. Inside Dr. Patel's letter, Mr. Edward Miller demonstrates decisional capacity. He understands the nature and consequences of his financial and healthcare decisions and can communicate his wishes clearly. I folded it with my keys. I didn't need to show it just to know it existed. Mark's phone buzzed. He listened, face easing slightly. "Thank you," he said, and hung up. "Optics?" I asked. "Better," he said. "For now," I echoed. Jason came downstairs in a hoodie. "I'm going out." Where Mark asked, halfway between father and roommate. "Campus, financial aid office. I want to make sure everything's set for next term." "Good luck," I said, my coffee steady in my hand. He studied me like I might know something he didn't, then left in a cloud of cologne and youth. The lake outside lay flat as a lie. The damage had spread, but it had also done its work. I turned to my journal, 2 columns. Noise video party spin. Proof witness letter locks. I closed the book and went to water the tomatoes. Then Jason crashed back through the door, folder stamped financial aid clutched in his hand, face pale with anger that hadn't decided if it was fear. "We need to talk," he said, slamming it onto the table. I was already there, coffee beside Dr. Patel's folded letter. "Morning," I said. "This isn't funny, Grandpa." He jabbed the papers. "They said the fund isn't accessible. They said there's some token now. They said I need owner authorization." "What is that, security?" I said softly. "A seatbelt." He blinked. "You set this up. Why would you make it hard for me? Because it is mine," I said. "And because you are not." The words landed. He barked a laugh with no friends in it. Mark wandered in late to the scene. "What's going on?" Jason waved the folder like a flag. "They're blocking the fund," Linda followed, drawn by the smell of conflict. "What do you mean blocked?" she asked, layering worry on top of calculation. "It's for school. It's in my name," I said. "Calm as naming a road." "It has always been in my name." Jason slammed his palm on the table. "Then sign it over." Mark's eyes flicked at me, then away. He didn't say please. He didn't say, "Don't talk to your grandfather like that." He said nothing, and silence was its own sentence. Linda forced a smile that looked like a receipt. "Edward, honey, we're just trying to keep things smooth. If the school needs an authorization, we can bring something by." Jason had already printed forms. She pulled one from the folder like a magician, temporary custodial access. At the bottom, my signature line. "Don't," I said, voice steady. Not that form. Not in my house. Jason scoffed. Why are you being difficult? I'm being exact, I said, sliding Dr. Patel's letter across the table. I can decide. I will decide. I will not be decided. He skimmed it jaw hard, then shoved it back. This is ridiculous. It's my education. Don't you care if I succeed? I care if you learn what success costs and who pays for it. He laughed sharp and bitter, pacing the kitchen, like anger was exercise. So what, you're punishing me? Because I had fun at a party? Because you, Jason. His name landed like a full stop. Once he dragged a stool here for cookies to surprise me. Now he wanted to corner me into surrender. We were both disappointed. Linda jumped in. Look, we're off track. This is just paperwork. If we sit down, we can do it together. The last time we did something together, I said I drowned for your entertainment. Silence arrived, like it had a key. Mark rubbed his temple. Dad, please don't say it like that. How should I say it? We're a family that jokes about drowning, a family that tells stories louder than facts. No one is telling stories, Linda snapped. Kayla is, I said. Brave ones. They froze, hard to deny when the whole town had eyes. Jason sneered. Who cares what she says? People who want to hire you, Mark muttered, HR still echoing in his head. Enough, Jason shoved the paper at me. Just sign the damn thing. I did nothing. Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. The paper hung between us like an accusation. Not this, I said again, standing. I folded the form, slid it under my coffee cup. I won't sign convenience. If I ever support your education again, it'll reward character, not contempt. Jason laughed short and mean. You act like some saint. You're just a stubborn old Jason. Mark barked, but too late. I rinsed my cup, unwilling to give profanity oxygen. When I turned back, their geometry had shifted. Jason seething, Linda offended, Mark already dreading Monday's inbox. Here's what's true, I said. You asked for access. I said no. That's the answer. I will not argue it. You'll regret this, Jason whispered. For the first time in weeks, I heard the boy he used to be afraid of consequences. I already regret plenty, I said. This isn't one. He stormed out, slamming a door like it proved control. Linda hissed after him. We'll talk later. That meant we'll scheme when the witness is gone. Mark stayed, staring at his hands. I don't know how we got here. I do, I said softly. One small, uncorrected thing at a time. He shut his eyes. I'm trying. Try the right thing, I told him. Try being his father. He nodded once, as if given permission to attempt something hard. The house settled into quiet clocks, suddenly loud. I carried the folded form to my room, pressed it under the blue glass paperweight Margaret once bought at a yard sale. A false request deserved something heavy and clear above it. My phone buzzed. Thomas Green. Ed, he said without preamble. 2 more pings. Same office IP, same inquiry. Denied. And here's the kicker, someone called the custodian, asking how guardian status gets set up. And I asked. They were told without your consent or a court order, it doesn't. We added a note to your file. All future queries go straight to counsel. No movement is possible without me knowing. One more thing, Thomas added. An anonymous welfare check came in this morning. Caller mentioned elder neglect. Cops may stop by. Don't panic, just be documented. I smiled into the phone. I have papers on the table and windows open. They can smell the bread Mrs. Carter dropped off. It'll confuse the story. Thomas chuckled. I like you, Mr. Miller. I like doors that open and lock when I choose. Monday, if you're ready, we call them in. Room with the peppermints at 2. You won't need to be there. I looked toward the lake, thought about how light shifts when it shows up uninvited. Call them. Tell them it's time they hear me without me. Done. Nora will handle logistics. Anything else, water on the table. Always. When the line went quiet, I felt something rare relief. Not escape. Clean paper. At noon, 2 officers knocked polite, not pounding. Mr. Miller, we had a concern called in. Mind if we step inside, please? I gave them what mattered. ID, birth date, pillbox, neat as a rose. Dr. Patel's note, Thomas's card. No anger, no shame, just facts offered like sandwiches, enough to sustain, but not stuff. Do you feel safe here? I feel documented? Prepared? The younger cop glanced at the letter. This is what we like to see. They walked through garlic and olive oil in the air. No unpaid bills, no clutter, a fresh line of ink drying in my journal. Silence worked for me. Thank you for your time, the older officer said, handing me a card. If anyone pressures you, call us. We don't mediate families, but we protect citizens. I know the difference. Thank you. When they left, I stood at the door letting the weight shift. Mark leaned from the hall. What was that, a welfare check? From someone worried I might be alone with my own decisions. He swallowed. We didn't call. Someone did. He rubbed his jaw. I'll talk to Jason. Good. Use your words. He almost smiled. Almost. That afternoon I went to the barber shop where men sit among opinions and leave with an easier neck. Joe snapped the cloth. Chair 2. No lake talk, just, how do you want your sideburns? Respect for small questions, a man in chair 1 muttered. Kids these days, then to me. Your tomatoes looked good. We swapped tips on soil and staking. When I paid, Joe slipped me extra change. Take Mrs. Carter a soda. The kind of small gesture that matters more than it should. On the way home, I stopped at the community garden. The sign still read, take what you need, leave what you can. I watered Margaret's bed. A little girl crushed basil between her fingers. Smells like pizza, she said. Everyone smiled. Truth told simply is disarming. By evening, clouds thickened, rain-dropping coins on the deck. Linda rearranged coasters like chess pieces. Mark took a heavy call outside. Jason stayed upstairs. The house breathed easier for it. At 6, the doorbell. Mrs. Carter with chicken salad firm expression. No one should be hungry while feeling feelings, she said. Ruth, how did you know? Because I'm old. Old folks know when not to leave you alone. She glanced past me at Linda, unreadable. Then back. Sunday was something. It was. I like the girl, she said, meaning Kayla. Honesty looks good on people. It does. If you need me Monday, I'm home until 2. I make a decent witness. The court taught me that when I was 25, and madder than God, I smiled at the category she'd just placed herself in. Thank you. I think I'll be elsewhere. But knowing your porch exists helps. It does, she said, and left. Linda waited. Why is everyone suddenly... She cut herself before saying on your side. She shifted tactics. It's like people are making this bigger than it is. It is exactly as big as it is, I said. She looked at me, found nothing to hold, and went to adjust a vase. Mark came in from the porch. HR wants me to send an email, he muttered. Nobody asked what it should say. He didn't ask me to draft it either, just opened his laptop and tried to rewrite his day. Upstairs, a door opened. Jason came down, hovering in the kitchen doorway like a boy waiting for permission. He held his phone like evidence. I told them to take the video down, he said, eyes elsewhere. Most did. Good, I said. He lingered, waiting for praise. When it didn't come, he tried again. Financial aid says I can appeal. As if that word would open wallets. You should, I said. Appeal to the part of you that used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. He flinched. For a second, the kid he used to be surfaced, then vanished back into pose and defense. He muttered something and retreated upstairs. The silence felt less like victory than balance. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. Nora, Mr. Miller, formal notices have been sent. Monday, 2nd, Huzuro Conference Room A. I'll meet your family at reception. Thank you, Nora. Do you need arrangements? A car. Sometimes distance helps. I'll walk. I lied. Very well. One more thing, Dr. Patel's letter is in your file. The officers filed a no concern note. It's unusually tidy. Mr. Green appreciates tidy. So do I said. When we hung up, I stood at the window. The rain wasn't angry, it was thoughtful. I wrote in my journal, Monday 2nd, Huzuro, Peppermint's Truth. Then water on the table, closed the book, turned out the light. The room remembered me. The house did too. Even the lake, once eager to own my story, stayed in its bowl. By Monday morning, I was up first, coffee strong enough to stiffen paper. I put on the shirt Margaret swore made me look dependable. Slipped Dr. Patel's letter and Thomas's card into my jacket pocket, ritual not necessity. Mrs. Carter's radio drifted a hymn across the hedge. Be still my soul. Mark came down with a tie. Linda in a dress that was more statement than fabric. Jason, last hoodie up, face still young enough to break a man who hadn't already learned to name things as they are. Where are you off to? Linda asked, not curious, just posturing. An appointment. With who? Jason pushed. A room with peppermints, I said. And some water. They stared. I smiled, picked up my keys. If anyone asks, tell them I'm busy being exactly who I am. I left by the side door. The rain had ended. The town dried itself in sun. Mrs. Carter lifted her soda bottle from her porch in salute. I tipped an imaginary hat. At the curb, I paused, not listening for sirens or gossip, just for the ordinary sounds that prove a life continues without permission. A dog insisting, a truck reversing carefully, a child cursing a zipper. The world hadn't shrunk to match my drama. That was the mercy. It stayed full-sized, yet somehow still left me room. The engine turned. Monday at 2, waited in an office where paper would hold its order, peppermints, in a bowl, water on the table, my truth heard without me in the chair. I never thought revenge would sound like silence. But that night, as the clock edged toward midnight and I sat in the corner of my own living room, I realized how much power lived inside restraint. My house, though. Linda strutted through it, like the deed already had her name buzzed with the muffled laughter of her friends. They filled the rooms with wine and noise, as if the walls carried no history. But every careless step only steadied me. I knew what was coming. Linda passed once glass of red in hand heels sharp on the hardwood. She didn't bother to look at me. Mark trailed behind her with champagne bottles flushed and uneasy. He never liked drinking, but that night, he let Linda set the tempo. Jason's on his way, she said loudly. He'll love this. A real housewarming, Mark muttered. Maybe Dad doesn't want Dad. Doesn't matter. This place is practically ours. I shifted in my chair, the leather creaking just enough to remind them I was still there. Hours later, when the guests finally cleared out near 2 a.m., Linda's laughter echoed down the hall. At the stairs, she stopped staring at me, glass in hand. Mark tugged her arm, but she wanted her little show. You really should get some rest, Edward, she said. It can't be good for your heart staying up this late. Don't worry, soon enough, you won't have to. I held her gaze until the smirk faltered. Mark muttered, Linda, let's just go, and pulled her upstairs. The next morning, I stepped onto the porch into the sharp bite of autumn air. Nora spotted me across the street and came briskly, Frank trailing with the paper. You holding up? She asked, eyes scanning me. I've been worse, I said with a half smile. Frank handed me the newspaper. Heard noise last night, thought we missed an invitation. Linda's friends, I answered evenly. Mark went along. Nora pressed her lips. And you just sat there? It was her stage. I wanted to see how far she'd dance. Frank cleared his throat. You sure you don't want us to? No, don't worry. They think I'm fading. They think I'm harmless. That's exactly what I want. Later that week, Thomas Green arrived with his briefcase, precise as ever. We sat at the kitchen table, Margaret's table. Everything's in order, he said, sliding a folder over. The Fifth Avenue apartment is filed under the trust. Linda can't touch it. I nodded. Margaret always called that apartment my rainy day corner. She was right. And the house I asked, Thomas smiled thinly. Still yours, Edward. When the time comes, it will pass exactly where you want it. I folded my arms. They're already making plans. Linda treats it like her castle. Mark looks at me like old furniture. Do you want me to move to the next step? Public notice? Not yet. Let them write their script. I'll change the ending. That evening, Mark stepped into my study, rare for him. He lingered at the door, hands in pockets. Dad? About Linda? About last night? She just gets carried away. I looked up. Carried away into treating this house like hers. He winced. She didn't mean it. Yes, she did. Silence hung until his shoulders sagged. And you let her, I added. His jaw tightened. For a flicker, I saw the boy he'd been wanting to please. Then Linda's voice echoed down the hall, calling his name, and his face hardened. I just want peace, Dad. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I almost laughed, but it slipped out as a sigh. Peace. You think peace comes from giving away what isn't yours to give? Mark looked away. You'll understand eventually. Then he left. 2 days later, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. No Mark this time, just her leaning against the counter, eyes sharp. You know, Edward, she said you should consider moving into something smaller, a retirement community maybe. This house is a lot for you to manage. I set down my coffee cup. Funny, I've managed just fine. Her smile was thin, rehearsed. You don't want to burden anyone. Mark and I are starting our lives. Jason will need space too when he's home from college. Think of it as practical. I let the silence stretch. Finally, I said softly, you should be careful, Linda. Sometimes when people think they're walking into an inheritance, they're walking into a trap. Her smile flickered, then straightened. You won't be around forever, Edward. No, I answered. But my decisions will be. That night I wrote a letter not for Linda or Mark, but for Jason. You may think cruelty makes you strong, I wrote. But cruelty is a debt, and debts always come due. I sealed it and slipped it into my desk drawer. One day, he'd find it. Weeks passed quietly. Outwardly, nothing changed. Linda hosted her dinners. Mark floated between guilt and obedience. Jason stayed gone, but under the calm surface, I was moving pieces. Nora whispered what she heard. Frank hid boxes in his garage, and Thomas Green waited for my word. Linda's every smirk, Mark's uneasy glances, they all fed the fire in me. Not rage. Something slower, controlled. They thought they were writing my ending. What they didn't see was that I was only halfway through, and the next chapter belonged to me. At 2 p.m., I wasn't in the room where my life was being read. That was intentional. If you want a clean cut, you don't hover over the scalpel. Instead, I sat in the diner across from Thomas Green's office. Chrome trim pie under glass domes, a waitress who called me Sir and Hon in the same breath. From my window seat, I could see the side door. My journal lay on the table pen, across it black coffee at my elbow. Water catching the late light. At 1:56, my phone buzzed. Nora, we're set. Table, water, peppermints in a bowl. At 1:59, Linda entered first, Mark behind Jason last. He took a peppermint. I smiled without showing teeth. Peppermints are sugar policy reminders that no one's here to win, only to listen. At 2:01, the phone buzzed again. Mr. Green is reading now. I set it face down, breathed steady. I wasn't praying, I was choosing silence like a man choosing firm ground. Thomas's voice never rises. It doesn't need to. Good afternoon. I'm Thomas Green. Mr. Miller asked me to read a letter into the record. This isn't a negotiation. It's a statement of fact. Where is he? Linda snapped. Unavailable by choice, Thomas answered. Shall we begin? He unfolded the page I'd signed beneath his lamp and read, To those who assumed my silence meant agreement. I gave everything once. I won't die twice. Nora later told me Mark shifted uncomfortably. Jason rolled the peppermint in his mouth, and Linda sat stone still, controlled, turning her into a statue. Thomas continued, voice steady as a mechanic listing parts. You turned my patience into a surface to skim. You made my breath a story to laugh at. Thomas set a folder on the table and walked them through it. The education fund you called yours is not yours. Effective last week, it was repurposed in full to the Margaret Miller Scholarship for first-generation students in this county. The custodian lists it as a paid. If you ask for access, you will be denied. If you attempt to bypass my client, the log will include your name. Jason sat forward. That's not legal. It is, Thomas said calmly, flipping to the next page. The rental apartment on 5th was transferred to the trust my client controls. Its net income will endow the scholarship annually. Linda exhaled hard, a bitter sound. He moved an asset. Thomas continued. The lake house remains Mr. Miller's until he dies, or directs otherwise. The deed and instructions are executed and held in escrow. Upon his passing, the property will transfer to a community land trust that prioritizes veterans and working families, or be sold for the same purpose. This house will not be a trophy. That one hit. Even across the street, I felt it. Thomas's voice stayed even. Medical and financial powers of attorney are executed. In the event of incapacity, decisions rest with Frank Dawson, failing him with counsel. Do not call facilities on my client's behalf. Do not call banks. His credit is frozen. His accounts require a physical token. Every inquiry pings this office. Mark cleared his throat, an old gesture from childhood. We were trying to prepare. Thomas placed another sheet beside the first. Dr. Shirley Patel examined Mr. Miller on Friday. Her letter confirms decisional capacity. He understands the nature and consequences of his financial and healthcare decisions and can communicate his wishes. You had him tested? Linda snapped. He asked to be documented. We obliged. Then came my words written in short lines. You may call this cruel. It isn't. It's clear. You may say I owe you. I don't. You may try to contest. If you lose, you will receive nothing per the no contest clause you've just triggered by threatening to call a lawyer in the lobby. Jason leaned forward. Tell him he's going to regret this. Thomas gave him a look like a carpenter at a bent nail. No. I'll tell him he is done regretting the wrong things. He closed the folder and pushed the water to the center. Peppermint, he offered. Linda stood stiffly as though the room had insulted her. Mark stayed seated, glass in hand, unsipped. Jason flicked the candy back into the bowl and marched out, shoulders squared like posture was all he had left. At 2:37, Nora texted red. Done. At 2:41, Thomas followed all as expected. They'll email. We'll file. I answered neither. I just sat at the diner pie untouched, listening to my breath. At 2:49, the phone rang. It's done. Green said, his voice carrying the softness of a decent man. Linda wanted PR. Mark wanted a reset. Jason wanted a fight. You got what you wanted, record and distance. Thank you, I said. I meant more than the letter. One more thing, he added. The foundation director sent a note of receipt. She wrote, "We know what courage looks like at 17. Kayla, I said quietly, letting the name settle like a tool in a box. I suspect so, Thomas replied. Anything else? Yes. Hold the deed instructions until I move. Water on Monday was the right call, he said, and we hung up. Like professionals do clean, when I got home the house had staged itself for a fight. Linda stood at the kitchen island with a yellow legal pad pen clicking sharp as punctuation. This is ridiculous. We will appeal. There has to be a path to a bank that reads minds to a doctor who lies. She glared at me. You don't get to make us look like villains, Edward. You don't need my help, I said. Her mouth went thin. Control doesn't like daylight. Mark sat at the table, elbows on his knees, not looking at either of us. Mater. Mark looked worn out, like a man who finally realized the gap between who he meant to be and who he'd become. Dad, he said quietly. I don't know how we got here. One small, uncorrected thing at a time, I answered. You still have time to correct something. Like what? His voice was almost boyish. Like your son? The words carried the echo of that day on the dock. Jason stomped down the stairs. So that's it. You threw away my education. No, I said. I moved it from the bank to people who value it. He gave a sharp laugh. You mean that scholarship? That's charity. It's an investment, I told him. Into kids who pull someone out of a lake, not kids who turn it into a joke. He rolled his eyes. It looked childish on a grown face. You want me to apologize? Jason asked. No, I said. I want you to improve. An apology is for you. Whatever he muttered, heading for the door. Darren knows a guy. Every Darren knows a guy, I replied. Not many know how to keep their name clean. He slammed the door cheaper than listening. Linda scribbled on her pad. If you think you can cut us out, I don't think I said. I filed. Mark sat rubbing his face like a man washing in a river that wasn't there. What happens now? Now I stop subsidizing a lie, I told him. I'm moving. Next week. Linda froze. Where's Silver Pines? They've got a garden, a workshop, and people who still say please and thank you. You can't just leave, she snapped. I can, I said. And I will. And this house, Mark asked, it's mine until it isn't. You'd kick your family out. Linda's outrage was rehearsed. I'd stop paying for a performance. 14 days. After that, locks change. You're adults, figure it out. You can't, she began. I already did. For a second, something softer hovered. Mark almost told the truth. Linda almost chose humility. Jason almost turned back. Then it vanished, and the house went back to silence. Packing at 65 isn't like packing at 30. You don't just throw things in boxes, you choose what deserves to go. I kept Margaret's old flannel, a photo of me holding a boy who once handed me dandelions and called them flowers. The blue glass paperweight she found at a yard sale bubble inside like a world unbroken. My journal, Dr. Patel's letter. Thomas's card, the safe deposit key, the token. Frank stopped by with boxes and his usual dry humor. I brought the fancy tape, the kind that pretends it's stronger than it needs to be. You always did like overkill, I said. Overcare, he corrected. There's a difference. We packed in silence until he lifted the old guitar. Jason? No, Jason. Names don't lie. You taking this? No. It belongs to a boy who's not here. He nodded, setting it down gently as if gentleness could fix the past. Mrs. Carter appeared with chicken salad, her look saying grief should never skip a meal. Label your boxes, she said, handing me a marker. Men always think they'll remember. They don't. I'll write big, I promised. She touched the stack of papers on my desk, saw the legal edges. Monday, she asked. Water stayed in the glass, I told her. That's all right then, she said, like we were talking about a pie that didn't fall. The night before I left, I wrote Mark a note and slid it under his coffee mug. Son, I wanted an easier sentence here. There isn't one. I love you. That's not a payment plan. If you want to find me, choose decency first. Let it grow for a month, then knock. If you come as a man, I'll answer as your father. For Linda, nothing she'd twist any word into an opening. For Jason, I pulled out the envelope I'd written earlier and added one last line. Strength isn't how loud you laugh when someone's drowning. It's how fast you kneel. I sealed it, placed it with the receipts meant to outlast rumor. Before bed, I walked to the dock. I didn't go to the edge. Survival isn't a hobby. I stood where wood meets dirt and listened to the lake keep its only promise, move forward while reflecting what's above. Margaret used to say that meant something. Tonight it did. Morning showed up like it always did, steady and unbothered. I brewed coffee strong enough to argue back. Wiped the sink it deserved to be left clean. On the fridge, I taped a short list, not requests, just clarity transfer utilities by the 15th return the spare key, forward your mail. A suitcase waited by the door lighter than it should have been. Frank agreed to store my boxes until Silver Pines could take the rest. I put on the shirt. Margaret liked it, made me look rested, even when I wasn't. At 8, I laid the keys and token on the table, but slipped the house key back into my pocket. Not yet. I didn't expect a goodbye, but Mark came down unshaven, stripped of excuses. Dad, he said. Son, I answered. You're going. I am. He swallowed. Can I? He couldn't finish. You can try again, I told him. Not today. But you can. He nodded, searching for words he didn't have. I'm sorry. I know I said. Make it useful. Linda's voice cut from upstairs until she spotted me. Leaving so early? On time, I said. She frowned. We'll talk. No, you'll listen someday. Outside, Mrs. Carter stood with a soda bottle while Frank's truck idled. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. Need a hand, he asked. Got it, I said. Ride shotgun anyway? He grinned. I set the suitcase in the truck bed, then turned for one last look. Same roofline, same stubborn windows. Margaret once called it a good hat. It looked smaller now, or maybe I finally stood taller. 2 blocks out, my phone buzzed. Nora, the foundation's director, a student nominated early. Essay title, Say It When It Counts. Envy, Kayla, I said. Frank glanced at me. What's that, a kid who told the truth when it was heavy? He nodded. Good. We rolled past the grocery store, the barber, the park bench, where I'd learned to end sentences. The town stayed steady. Silver Pines wasn't a sentence, it was a choice. Clean halls, cedar in the workshop, a garden with a sign, row 7 open. The manager handed me a key. Welcome home, she said. In my room I placed 3 things: Margaret's flannel, the paperweight, and a photo of a boy, once proud of his dandelions. The silence here wasn't punishment, it was earned. I opened my journal, wrote I chose this, underlined it, closed the book. The phone rang again. Thomas Green. Thank you for being clear. Saving for file. TG. Some sentences take a lifetime to hear. They rarely arrive the way you picture. They count anyway. Through the window I saw a man staking tomatoes, a woman with a walker, pausing to admire. Down the hall someone laughed freely. I sat breathing in air that asked no permission. Back at the lake there'd be echoes. Here there was quiet agreement. I poured water, set it down without spilling. Then I said aloud, for the walls to hold, I gave everything once. I won't die twice. The room kept it. The world moved on. And so would I.